Iran's so-called morality police will not be allowed to operate in the wake of protests across the country. I'm Rob Matheson. This is Aljazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, Turkiye reportedly targets military sites in northern Syria, saying it will go after Kurdish armed groups anywhere to protect its security interests. Former U.S. President Donald Trump again says he should be reinstated in the White House, but takes his demands a big step further. And in Sunday's World Cup action, can the Polish team make history and beat champions France? We're going to begin in Iran, where the security unit tasked with enforcing strict dress codes has stopped operations. The decision to close the so-called morality police force follows nearly 3 months of anti-government protests and violent crackdowns on demonstrations. They were sparked by the death, while in police custody, of 22-year-old student Mahsa Amini in September. Nosra Jabari has more from Tehran.
It's the first real indication we've had from any official in the country that there needs to be some changes, and there have been some changes made. Now, what the Attorney General said was that the same institution that formed this morality police, or the guidance patrol as they're also called, has decided to shut it down. What he didn't specify was that whether or not this would be permanent, and also who would be now left in charge with enforcing the mandatory dress code in Iran that's been part of the country's laws since 1983. The Attorney General said that there's also a series of discussions that are ongoing, and that there has been draft proposals that they're working on from the judiciary perspective on how to make changes about who will be in charge of enforcing these laws. The Attorney General also said that, of course, the issue of mandatory hijab and the dress code in the country is certainly still very much a concern for the judiciary, but that it doesn't directly have anything to do with them, and that the issue of the women who aren't, according to officials, abiding by the strict dress code should not automatically go to the judiciary, but rather it should be dealt within the country's cultural sector itself.
At least 2 people have died during an anti-government protest in southeastern Syria. There was gunfire after demonstrators stormed a government building in Sweda and set it on fire. Syrian state media say the crowd burned official documents. Protesters are angry at the government because of rising prices and economic hardship. Syria has been experiencing fuel shortages and power outages. Turkiye has reportedly targeted multiple military sites in northern Syria, controlled by the largely Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces. Areas in Raqqa province are believed to have been hit by Turkish artillery and drone strikes. Turkiye has stepped up attacks in areas controlled by Kurdish fighters. It blames them for an explosion in Istanbul last month. The SDF says it's documented about 70 attacks since Turkiye announced its operation on November the 20th. Well, the SDF controls a large part of northeastern Syria, highlighted on this map in yellow. Turkish-backed Syrian groups are in charge of some regions in the north. These can be seen in purple and green. The area in the southeast, also highlighted in green, is controlled by other Syrian opposition forces, supported by the US. The Syrian government controls the rest. The spokesman for the Turkish president says the government will not stop targeting armed groups. Special advisor Ibrahim Kalin told Resul Serdar Kurdish fighters were exploiting their ties with the US.
In the recent incident when the terrorists attacked the civilians on Istiklal Street, which is one of the kind of hard points, main points of Istanbul, of course we had to respond, and our initial response was to coordinate and conduct a number of air operations. And of course, depending on the threat level, as assessed by our intelligence and our defense ministry and other related agencies, we will go after these terrorists, whether from the air or from the ground. Mm-hmm. For us, any and all PKK, PYD, YPG establishments, elements, posts, military points are legitimate targets for us. Whether they are in western Syria or in eastern Syria, northern Syria, near the border or far away from it. They are legitimate targets because they are terrorist organizations. And we go after them to protect our border. We don't target Russian or American soldiers or military posts in Syria or anywhere else.
American
Our
officials
targets
are saying that
are PKK, PYD, YPG elements. And we tell them to stay away, of course, from those elements. You see, PYD, YPG is using, at one point, the American flag, at another point, the regime flag to protect itself, saying that, you see, you cannot attack us because there are Americans here, or you cannot attack us because there are regime forces here. Sometimes they do this with the Russians, less so recently, but in the past. That, I think, shows the extent to which PYD, YPG is using their alliance with the United States to legitimate their own presence in northern Syria.
You can watch the entire interview with Ibrahim Khalil on Talk to Aljazeera at 19:30 GMT. Sinem Kosioglu is following developments from Kilis in southern Turkiye. She says Turkish forces are poised for a planned incursion into northern Syria.
It's been days that the Turkish government has been saying it is about to launch a ground offensive against the Syrian Kurdish fighter group YPG in northern Syria. Meanwhile, the Turkish military pursues its air campaign targeting the group since November 20 following Istanbul bomb attack through artilleries and airstrikes. Turkish military sources tell us that they are ready for the ground offensive, but as the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is also the chief of command in the army, they are waiting for an order from the president. And as per the officials in Ankara, they've been telling us that Turkey is first trying to solve the problem on the diplomacy table. For Turkey, the SDF, the Syrian Kurdish fighter group, which Turkey says is the Syria branch of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, must withdraw down south for 30 kilometers as per an agreement with the United States back in 2019 when Turkey conducted an operation against the group. But as per the United States, this distance is not 30 kilometers, but it's less. And the SDF side say they have never been told to withdraw in this step. This is one of the conditions that Turkish government is asking for in the negotiations. But also, on the other hand, there is an election coming up in June 2023, and Turkish President Erdogan needs to launch this ground offensive as he has promised to do so since last spring. This is also what people expect. And according to the latest polls, since October until this day, the job approval for the president has declined nearly 3%, which may mean the Istanbul bomb attack meant as a weakness of security for the public opinion.
Russia says it will not accept a plan by Western countries to impose a price cap on its oil. On Friday, the group of 7 nations, EU and Australia, announced a limit of $60 a barrel on Russian oil imported by sea. But Ukraine says that should be brought down to $30 a barrel. The measure is designed to limit a major source of funding for Russia's war in Ukraine. It's expected to come into effect on Monday. Well, the level of destruction across Ukraine is the worst Europe has seen since World War II. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless after Russia's invasion. Thousands more are living in damaged buildings as winter sets in. Rory Challens reports from the Kyiv region.
Valentina Tavlui gets emotional when she remembers what happened here in February.
We were sitting in the kitchen. We never expected that we'd be bombed. I was sitting in front of the window when the explosion threw me to the floor. I don't remember much after then, but after that I fled to the forest.
It was April before she returned to pick up the pieces. Zalisia, her village northeast of Kyiv, saw fierce fighting as Russian troops tried and failed to take Ukraine's capital.
Can you imagine? All the roof was damaged, the windows, the doors. Thank God the walls were still standing, and the Red Cross helped us to repair the roof. But there are people who lost everything.
The estimated cost of rebuilding Ukraine keeps spiralling upwards. In September, the World Bank said it was $350 billion. A month ago, Ukraine's government guessed $750 billion. Now, President Zelensky is saying $1 trillion. Non-governmental organisations like the International Committee of the Red Cross have some money to help, but it's millions, not billions.
Of course, we can't help all of people here, so we focus on the most vulnerable population here. So it's big families with many children and people with low income, mostly elderly people, and also people with disabilities.
Their cash handouts can be used for whatever repairs are most pressing, but snow and ice have brought most building work to a standstill, so new registerees like Zineda might have to wait until spring.
Winter is not an abstract concept, particularly during wartime, whereas in the warmer months you'd probably be okay living in a building like this with blown out windows or a damaged roof. When the temperature plummets, such conditions really take their toll.
Metal cabins house some whose homes are uninhabitable, but their mains powered, so in the frequent blackouts they quickly become refrigerators. Valentina is trying to stay positive.
It could be worse compared to our boys in the trenches. They're freezing. I keep active during the day, but last night it was a bit scary when the lights went off. I put on my hat, my hood. The electricity was off from 1 until 9 p.m.
But winter has only just begun. It's going to feel like a very, very long one indeed. Rory Challens, Aljazeera, Kiev region.
Delegates from 10 countries are meeting in Baghdad, the capital of Iraq, to talk about issues related to stolen antiquities. Egypt, Greece, China, Iran and Italy are among the countries represented at the Ancient Civilizations Forum. It aims to enhance communication, protect world heritage and bolster cultural tourism. Mahmoud Abdelwahed has more from Baghdad.
The 6th edition of the Ancient Civilizations Forum has been held in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. 10 countries are taking part in this forum. They include Greece, China, Egypt, Peru, Iran, Italy, and Mexico. Those countries have some of the most ancient civilizations in the world. They also have about 40% of the world's population. They want to utilize these civilizations, the cultural heritage they have in their own countries, to enhance a language of culture, to use it as a kind of soft diplomacy, to promote peace, to promote cultural communication between these countries, and also to combat what they consider the hate speech that has been prevailing because of frequent wars and conflicts in the region.
We are taking this opportunity to enhance cultural and historical tourism in Iraq. We also want, through this forum, to resume retrieving looted monuments and set regulations to combat smuggling.
Iraq has been selected to host the 6th edition of the Ancient Civilization Forum because Iraq is home to one of the oldest civilizations in history, starting from Mesopotamia, and then the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, until the Sasanians. Iraq is also considered one of the most impacted countries among all the stakeholders because Iraq has suffered the most by frequent wars, frequent conflicts, not only its people, not only its economics, not only its territories, but also its cultural heritages. A lot of its cultural sites, historical sites, monuments have been destroyed by frequent wars, and tens of thousands of priceless artifacts have been looted and smuggled outside of the country.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is planning to go to the Constitutional Court to challenge a report that found he may have violated his oath of office. An independent panel investigated Ramaphosa after he failed to report the theft of millions of dollars from his game farm in 2020. The governing African National Congress is discussing the matter on Sunday. Ramaphosa says he's not been taking part in that meeting and he's also refused to step down.
It's always best when a matter that affects a person personally should be discussed in their absence. So that's precisely what has led to my recusal, to enable members of the National Working Committee to have a thoroughgoing discussion on the report without my presence, without rather me being there, so that they are free to express themselves as openly and as thoroughly as possible without any form of fear or favor.
Mohammed Jamjoom has more from Johannesburg.
On this, the first of 2 consecutive days of meetings by governing African National Congress party leaders to try and figure out how to move forward with this political crisis that has been surrounding President Cyril Ramaphosa. You certainly wouldn't know from the mood on the streets here in Johannesburg that the situation is extremely dire for the president, but in fact it is. Now, we found out on Saturday that President Ramaphosa is not going to resign, that he is not going to step aside as party leader of the ANC, and that he intends to mount a legal challenge to this report by an independent panel that found that he may have committed misconduct in office while serving as president. This is a scandal that has gotten worse and worse for President Ramaphosa over the course of the past few weeks, and right now it's a critical juncture for the president. On Tuesday, the National Assembly, Parliament, is going to be meeting to take up the matter. There may be a vote put forward as to whether or not an impeachment inquiry, a formal impeachment inquiry, will be happening in Parliament. But again, we found out from the presidential spokesperson that in fact President Ramaphosa is going to fight, that he is not going to step aside, he is not going to resign. Still leaves a lot of questions at a time when the situation for him is politically dire, and when just a few days ago many here expected that he would resign.
The White House has criticized former President Donald Trump for suggesting parts of the Constitution should be thrown out. In a social media post on Saturday, Trump said the 2020 election result should be overturned and he should be reinstalled as president. The Biden administration says the Constitution is a sacrosanct document, and Trump's comments should be universally condemned. Heidi Jo Castro is in Washington, D.C., and she says the latest outburst from Trump is likely to prompt strong reactions from within the Republican Party.
This is extraordinary that a former U.S. president would publicly state this, given that the oath of office he's taken is to protect the U.S. Constitution. And to so publicly post this on his Truth Social platform. He is calling for the 2020 elections, which he lost, to be overturned, for him to be reinstalled. And he goes on to say that a massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. So, of course, the world at this point is used to these bombastic statements coming from former President Trump. But this perhaps is considered to cross a new line, given in such high esteem that the U.S. Constitution is held. But this is just the latest in a series of actions that Trump has taken of late since he announced that he wants to run a third time to be president, in which he's moved closer to extremism in meeting with anti-Semites at Mar-a-Lago, and in also stating that he would pardon the rioters, his supporters, who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th if he is elected back to the White House. The Republican leaders have been reacting to Trump's move toward extremism with concern, hoping that he would not take these measures, given that the party performed in a way that was underwhelming in the last midterm elections. But Trump, as typical, has not taken that advice and seems rather to be doubling down on this rhetoric of claiming that the election was stolen and now calling for the termination of the U.S. Constitution.
3 Chinese astronauts have touched down on Earth after spending 6 months in space. The group landed in the Gobi Desert in China on Sunday. They helped complete the construction of the Tiangong space station. 3 other astronauts arrived at the station on Wednesday. The structure is part of China's plans to have a permanent human presence in space.